MPs are back debating the EU withdrawal bill today. That's the bill which aims to ensure European law will no longer apply in the UK after Brexit. But of course, what happens in Parliament is only one part of the Brexit process, which is set to dominate politics in 2018. The Brexit negotiations are ongoing, although at the moment the discussions are between officials. A date hasn't yet been set for the next face-to-face meeting between the Brexit Secretary, David Davis, and opposite number, Michel Barnier. Top of the agenda will be agreeing the terms of a transition agreement to cover a period of around 2 years. Theresa May is also expected to host further cabinet discussions to hammer out what the UK's final relationship with the EU should look like. And she's hoping to be in a position to set out her vision of that relationship in her third major Brexit speech in February. A meeting of the European Council, that's the heads of government from across the EU, will get underway in March. Could this be the moment when the terms of the transition deal will be agreed? And both the UK government and the EU are hoping to reach final agreement on separation issues by October 2018. It's unclear whether the future trading relationship will be covered by a broad political declaration or a more detailed agreement. And after any deal is agreed, it will need to be voted on in the UK Parliament. And there will also be ratification in the EU Parliament and the remaining EU countries. On the 29th of March 2019, the UK will leave the EU and, in theory, enter a transition or implementation period. The EU have said they think that the transition deal should end by December 2020. Well, MEPs in Strasbourg have this morning been debating the deal struck at the end of last year, the first phase of the negotiations. Our correspondent, Adam Fleming, is there as usual. Adam, tell us what was discussed.
Hi, Joe. Well, the big thing today was Donald Tusk, the President of the European Council, the man who chairs those all-important summits, saying that the door was still open for the UK to stay in the EU if British voters decide to change their minds. Now, he has said something like this before. Do you remember last summer when he channeled John Lennon and said, "Imagine a world where there's no Brexit"? But he's never said it quite as strongly as this. Here's what he had to say a couple of hours ago in the European Parliament chamber.
If the UK government sticks to its decision to leave, Brexit will become a reality with all its negative consequences in March next year, unless there is a change of heart among our British friends. Wasn't it David Davis himself who said, "If a democracy cannot change its mind, it ceases to be a democracy"? We, here on the continent, haven't had a change of heart. Our hearts are still open to you.
And that sentiment was echoed by Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the European Commission, who said he hoped that message was heard loud and clear in London. Now, what both men said, though, was that what they really want now is for the UK government to provide more clarity about what sort of relationship they want with the EU ahead of those negotiations about phase 2, about trade, cooperation on security and defence and all sorts of stuff like that, which will start after another EU summit in March.
Fleming, thank you very much there in Strasbourg. Well, we're joined now by the Conservative MP and Leave supporter Nigel Evans. Nigel, I don't know how much of that you could hear, but what do you make of Donald Tusk saying it's just not too late for the UK to change its mind?
I heard it all, and we have changed our mind. We decided in 1975 to vote to stay in the European Union, and we've changed our mind. We've now decided to come out. And if in 40-odd years the British people want to have another say, then maybe we'll change our minds again. But maybe the European Union are going to change their minds, Joe, about their approach to how the European Union is going to develop over the coming years. They've got problems with Poland, they've got problems with Hungary, they've got economic disaster in countries like Greece, who are going for another £5 billion bailout with more austerity measures. They've got a huge number of problems on their plate, and I should really focus on that. I know the European Union are used to countries voting in treaty referendums and then when they get it wrong being asked to vote again.
Right.
Well, nobody's asking for us to vote again other than those who really want us to stay in the European Union.
Right. Well, and as you say, there are some, although Nigel Farage did raise the spectre of the idea of a second referendum, even if he was slapped down for it afterwards. I mean, several MPs who supported Remain, as you know, including my guest of the day here, Anna Soubry, met Michel Barnier in Brussels. That door has been opening and closing rather a lot recently. Do you think that's a helpful contribution to the negotiations? negotiations?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what Anna said to Michel Barnier, whether she and Dominic Grieve and a few others that have been there actually spelt out the real issue is that we voted to leave by a clear margin. 57% of my own constituency voted to leave. Every constituency in Lancashire voted to leave. Anna Soubry's own constituency by 54% voted to leave. And so I think it's quite a clear message, 1.4 million difference in the largest participatory referendum that this country has ever seen. And so it's quite clear we're going to go. And all we want to do now is to leave on really good terms.
Well,
and I'm hoping that's what Anna was talking to Michel Barnier about, absolutely, is that we still want to buy all that champagne from France and the Prosecco from Italy and the Mercedes and Audis. Sure. From Germany, and we still want to trade with them.
Right. Well, let's talk about the deal, but the transition is needed to be agreed before you get to the sort of end point, the deal. What do you say to reports today that the EU is going to insist on the transition being virtually exactly the same as the status quo, including freedom of movement continuing?
Yeah, we're going to have to see about that. It does seem to me as if the argument is being reopened now when we all thought that the issue as far as EU citizens in Britain and British citizens in the European Union had been properly settled. And I understand that the Polish are saying, well, they're unhappy with that and they would rather like it to continue during the transition period.
So you thought freedom of movement would finish in March 2019 and that's what you would like Theresa May to secure?
Well, that's what I would like, yes. I think there needs to be some certainty and everybody's got the opportunity over the next, 18 months or so, that if they really do want to come and settle and have the same rights as other EU citizens in the United Kingdom, to do just that, and the other way around.
Right.
Otherwise, we're just extending it for another 2 years.
Would you accept those terms continuing during transition? Single market membership, part of the customs union, taking and accepting some rules from the European Court of Justice and allowing any EU citizens who come here up until 2020 to have full residency rights like British citizens would in other EU countries. Would you accept those terms?
Joe, I'm a pragmatist, and I know that the Prime Minister and David Davis will be negotiating over the next coming months up till March or October, as you say, later this year. And my own view on that is I'm not going to tie the hands of the Prime Minister. If she is able to negotiate a sensible deal and a trade-off in other areas by accepting that, I'm going to leave it to her. I'm going to back the Prime Minister in the negotiation that she's currently doing. I'm not going to tie her hands on this one.
All right. What about the EU withdrawal bill? That's obviously back in the Commons. It's the flagship piece of Brexit legislation.
Another 2 days.
Another 2 days. I'm sure you're looking forward to it. And the government was defeated by Tory rebels last month, including by Anna Soubry. Are you expecting more trouble on this bill?
Only in the House of Lords. I mean, Anna will let us know when I finish talking about what the approach is from those who are, let's say, more pro-European than union than I am. But I understand that when it gets to the House of Lords, that clearly people like Lord Adonis and Michael Heseltine, who are still digging trenches and fighting the last war, as far as the referendum are concerned, you know, that they are going to do what they possibly can to thwart Britain leaving the European Union. Well, it's going to be an interesting battle, Joe. It's going to be the peers versus the people. It's going to be the unelected members of the House of Lords versus the sovereignty of the British people who voted in a referendum. And we all remember that David Cameron sent a pamphlet to every household in the country costing £9 million. And on the back it said, "We will respect the wishes of the British people." It's going to take a very brave House of Lords to stand up against the British people.
All right, Nigel Evans, thank you. Now, Anna, we mentioned there you went to Brussels. You went to see Michel Barnier yesterday with a group of others. I think there's a picture, actually. It was probably
no, we didn't just see
on,
Michel Barnier. We actually saw some other people as well.
But Michel Barnier was one of the people you did
very
see.
Much so.
And what did he say to you? What did you say to him?
No, we had a private conversation, a private discussion, the details of which I'm not going to go into. But I can tell you that obviously we made the case and we made it very clear that we want the best deal that we can possibly get. But in all our discussions yesterday, it was really very interesting, the messages that we were getting back. There is obviously very grave concern about whether or not we are being realistic and indeed whether or not people are being properly informed as to the reality of what is likely to be offered. You see, we've put ourselves in a difficult position. We're leaving the European Union, but we've then tied our hands, unfortunately, by the red lines that the government set down before the general election in June.
Right, except, of course, that Nigel Evans has just said. He's not going to tie the government's hand during the transition period. The status quo will remain.
No, sorry. The transition period is a whole load of other stuff as well. I'm talking about the red lines that the Prime Minister laid down in her Lancaster Gate speech, which said no single market, no customs union, no ECJ.
And you still think that's a possibility?
What?
That we would remain in the single market, that we would remain in...
No, we can't. No, sorry. By putting down those red lines, before a general election, which clearly we lost our majority, which was a rejection of the British people of that hard Brexit, which I think the Prime Minister, I don't think she wanted it, but I think those behind her did. They were preparing for that. That's what the EU withdrawal bill is about. It's about delivering a hard Brexit. Things have changed. The trouble is, we've not changed our red lines. So what the EU can offer us is limited because we have behind these red lines, which we will not even begin to blur.
So
is your motive... options available?
Sure. Well, if that limits the options available, and as you say, it's heading towards a hard Brexit in your mind, with the EU withdrawal bill, will you oppose and defeat the government?
I didn't say that. Do forgive me. I didn't say that. And I'm hoping that that is not what will happen. And I don't believe for one moment that our Prime Minister wants that. The difficulty is that as far as the EU is concerned, everything is on the table. Single market, customs union, ECJ, and all the things that then flow from that. Our problem is, as a country, is that we have reduced the options and we've not revisited them in the wake. My own very strong belief is that we should put all the options back on the table to enable decent negotiations to carry on. So in the transition period, we really have to be honest with people and realistic. The EU hold the cards.
Right. Well, of course, the government say that isn't the case, and actually
they hold the cards.
Well, one commentator, Tim Montgomery on Twitter, quoted Margaret Thatcher when he saw your picture of you and other Remainers going to see Michel Barnier, saying that this was treachery with a smile on its face. What do you say to him?
And I'm not interested in that. We were having a very good discussion, which is what the British people want to hear about.
But are you betraying people who voted leave?
I'm not interested in playing this game of politics.
But are you betraying?
I am not interested in playing that game of politics.
It's not a game of politics. You said that the government has tied its hand with its red lines, and you disagree. But are they not just representing and reflecting the 17.4 million people who voted leave?
No, because when people voted leave, they voted to leave the European Union, and we're going to leave the European Union. But they didn't put on the ballot paper. And what wasn't part was, what does leave mean? And one of the big problems that the European Union has is that our government still hasn't decided what leave means. Now, Joe, come on. When you go into negotiations, how can the EU deal with a government that hasn't itself worked out what it wants?
Right, well, it's going to. And then, of course, later this month, the EU withdrawal bill will go to the Lords. Do you agree with Nigel Evans that the Lords could perhaps overturn some of what's been achieved in the Commons?
The Lords will do whatever the Lords wish to do. They will put down, no doubt, all sorts of amendments. And some of those...
do you cheer them on to do that?
What are in the amendments?
Well, I mean, if they're going to have pro-European peers like Michael Heseltine who agree with you, what are you hoping the Lords will achieve to help you achieve
What
your
I want the Lords to do is do its job, which is to scrutinise legislation. That is their job, and I hope that they will do that. What I think is more important than all of this is that, in my opinion, the British people are fed up to the back teeth with Brexit. Fed up with it.
And what evidence have you got for that?
Because I'm a constituency MP, because I know what my constituents tell me, and I know when I've just been elected only 6 months ago. And people are fed up with Brexit.
And they wouldn't want a second referendum or a referendum on the deal?
Can I just finish my sentence?
Yes.
They are fed up with Brexit, and they want somebody to get on and deliver on Brexit. And they also want, and they're increasingly concerned, as they understand the arguments, as they learn more about the reality of Brexit, they are worried. Ordinary, good people are worried. So
would they like to see a vote on the deal, the terms of the deal? Would you support that?
That is for the people. Vote? That is for the people of this country. They are in charge. They have to be. They are in charge of this.
But they wouldn't make a decision about a second public vote. That would have to be Parliament. And
no. It comes from the people. And all these things must come from the people. Politicians can have their points of view. Mr Farage has a point of view. But It must come from the people, and they must be in charge of the whole of this Brexit process. But they are uneasy, and at the moment they have two political parties that they don't believe represents them. There are millions of people in our
country. Except although 82% of them voted for both of them in the election. But anyway, we're going to have to stop. We're going to have to stop it there because we've got to get on to the other items.
And I'm not allowed to respond.
You have responded quite fully.